my first question is about the panel you'll be participating in tomorrow, and it's called Addressing Inequalities and Challenges to Inclusion Through Fiscal, Wage, and Social Protection Policies. How does this contribute to the social development goals of the United Nations? And what do you hope to see being achieved at the end of the conference, basically?
Two big questions. Well, first, it's quite a mouthful as a title. And there's a reason for this, because, as you know, inequality is one of the major issues. And we're not going to reduce poverty if we don't address the inequalities. Because a lot of the projection that we're making right now, in terms of growth, we used to assume that growth is going to lift all the boat. And it doesn't. Now we know that the top 1% is capturing the majority of the growth that we create and the revenues and income that we generate. And one of the issue is wages. And one impact of the concentration of market power in the hands of the few is that now the multinational actually control more of the market and basically capture most of the revenue going to capital as opposed to labor. And that means that the real wages have not been increasing. And that's why we're seeing the middle class being disappearing. And then as the middle class disappear, you see the election that we're seeing with the right-wing movement growing around the world. So it's really a messy world that we've put ourselves into by not addressing inequality. And we're back to inequality level that were there before the antitrust breakup at the beginning of the century. And so we need to do something, especially because a lot of the environmental issues that we're dealing with, like climate change and biodiversity losses and the state of our ocean, basically we have about 10 to 15 years, depending on who you listen to address those. And oftentimes, the elite that capture most of the revenues do not have this as their top agenda items, and therefore they don't get addressed in our legislatures. And therefore that's another reason why we need to address inequality. So inequality is extremely important. And one of the things also that, because we work with UNCTAD, the UN Conference on Trade Development, we're the focal point at the UN for investment, trade, development, finance, technology, and entrepreneurship. And there's more illicit financial flows going out of developing countries than there actually are official development aid. So if these countries could actually, if together as a community, we could cut some of those illicit financial flows that go in these paradise like we've seen, then government would have the resources to be able to invest in education, health, transport, safe transport, sanitation, water, energy, the basic services that people need. Otherwise, when these services are not provided, it's the poorest of the poorest that get affected the most. And so, for instance, household headed by women are the most affected. And if you don't provide these basic services, the women get the majority of the unpaid duty to take care of the elder, the sick, the young, etc. So this is kind of what I'm hoping that we're going to be putting a sense of urgency tomorrow.
That is fascinating that you answered both of my questions in one answer. Should I ask another one, or do we? Sure. We have another question? Okay. No, it was amazing. So, CIfa. It seems that it is the first time that it had the opportunity to be at the United Nations and of any NGO to have this kind of forum. What's the significance of being here at the United Nations?
Well, it's extremely significant, especially now. So I've been to the previous conferences in Monaco, and we're sad that we're bringing you to this terrible weather while Monaco is gorgeous. But there's a significance to come here in New York, because this is the center of where decision gets made by our member states. This is where they negotiated the Sustainable Development Goals. And one of the major issue is investment. How do we ensure that there's enough both public but also private investment? And CIfa, of all people, the group is basically focusing on the idea that the big bank, too big to fail, are basically part of the problem. And how do we fix this problem? How do we ensure that there's enough foreign direct investment going to the least developed countries, the landlocked developed countries, developing country, the small island developing state? There's very little private capital going there. So I'm hopeful that with CIfa here, we can actually start opening up that box and trying to figure out what are the bottleneck and be able to together work on this with the member states. Because it's one thing, the private sector can do their thing and the member state can do something. But if we come together with the NGOs, then we can accomplish a lot.